Okay, I begin with words. The words point is it's a very simple one. We have to steal words back. Words which have been stolen from us, we have to steal back. And that is true not just of democracy and political democracy, it's true of socialism, which has been taken to mean either social democracy or Stalinism. It's true of communism, which has been taken to mean Stalinism and nothing but Stalinism. We have to steal these words back. And in order to, and stealing these words back, we have to also think outside the box. It is orthodox, it is entirely orthodox. What Marx says about the word economism is the entire orthodoxy of the left. Okay, I was one of the people who was involved in developing that interpretation of economism as a stick with which to beat the Cliffites over the head in the 1970s, because it came from the Mandelites. It's actually Benside and Co.'s interpretation of economism. If you go back, if you read, okay, this is another access to a research library, if you read the very extensive quotations from the actual economists in Lars T. Lee's book on Lenin's What Is to Be Done, you will see, actually, your own arguments staring you in the face. Now, it may be that Trotsky was right in 1904 in our political tasks, and Lenin was wrong. Yeah. It may be that that's the case. The judgment, however, the difficulty is, what did Trotsky's line in relation to we have to make the political task grow out of the conduct of the immediate struggle? That was Trotsky's line in our political tasks. Yeah? What did Trotsky's line lead to in the period 1905 to 1917? What did Luxemburg's line in the mass strike lead to in Poland in the period 1904 to 1917? In both cases, what it led to, in Trotsky's case, what it led to is failure to organise anything other than shifting manoeuvres between the different factions of the Russian Social Democratic Party, Social Democratic Workers' Party. In Luxemburg's case, it led to the construction of a sect. And in fact, actually, this method of we're going to make the political struggle grow out of the economic struggle without thinking about politics as a whole, this is not my schema, it's not Jack Conrad's schema, it's the historical experience of the workers' movement over the 20th century that method has not led to the construction of mass parties, but only to either loose shifting alliances on the left of the mass workers' party or sects. Yeah? That's what it's produced. And it's produced that because it's a point which Marx makes, actually, for God's sake, in relation to the 10-hour day stuff. He makes the point that there is a difference between a trade union campaign for the 10-hour day for our members and a campaign of the working class as a whole for the 10-hour day to be made into law. And he says, when the working class as a whole campaigns for the 10-hour day to be made into law, now it's going beyond the immediate direct economic struggle of bargaining face-to-face for more better conditions for our members, to the class as a class asserting its interests on the scale of the nation state. Yeah? And it's that political assertion that is necessary. There's the fundamental point, which is the difference between Lenin and the economists, and is also the difference between Marx and Engels and the Bakuninists, and is also actually the difference between what our arguments are, is that we cannot just jump from the trade union struggle as trade union struggle to the struggle for power without projecting a political assertion of the working class's interests in relation to the state as a whole. economism, therefore, it's not a question of, it is a question that we're redefining economism relative to what is common sense on the left. But I know where this common sense on the left came from, yeah? From the Mandelites, and that's where it came from. We fought it into the British workers' movement, yeah? But we weren't prepared to, we did it not to read the text precisely because we were, in the 1970s, committed to the idea of the transitional programme, committed to the idea that by carrying on the struggle for workers' control on the individual shop floor through factory bulletins, etc., etc., that was going to grow over into the struggle for political power through Soviets. Why did we fucking stop doing it? Okay, I was a Trotskyist oppositionist within the Mandelite organisation for many years. You know? We stopped doing it because when it came to the test in Portugal, the line of build, generalise, develop the workers' councils provided no solution to the problem of government which was immediately posed to the Portuguese working class. Yeah? And in consequence, although people set up workers' councils, the militants who set up workers' councils, who sincerely and honestly wanted to change things in Portugal in 1974-76, went back to the Communist Party, went back, in some cases, to the Socialist Party, but mainly went back to the Communist Party, because they needed a programme for government. Yeah? They needed a decision-making mechanism, alternative to the capitalist decision-making mechanisms, and the workers' councils as such didn't play that role. So, back to the question. Workers' councils and the dictatorship of the proletariat. I pose to you option one. We have workers' councils, electoral system based on workers' councils. Nobody gets to vote unless they can vote in a workplace. Yeah? Okay? And we have a standing army, a centralised state bureaucracy, and a central Supreme Court which can overrule the decisions of the workers' councils if they're inconsistent with the rule of law and the Constitution. That is not the dictatorship of the proletariat. It doesn't fucking matter that the form of elections is through workers' councils. It's the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. It doesn't matter that there are workers' councils. Equally, we have a state based on workers' councils. This is the Russian state as it actually was in the early 1920s. The Soviet, the Petrograd Soviet, meets once a year. Yeah? And it elects an executive committee, which meets every 2 months, and the executive committee elects a presidium, which actually carries on the government of the city. Yeah? And the executive committee elects the delegates to the Supreme Soviet, which also meets once a year, elects an executive committee, elects a presidium, and the presidium elects the Sovnarkom, the Council of People's Commissars. That's not the dictatorship of the proletariat either. It's the emerging dictatorship of the bureaucracy.
That's because you distorted it. Your organisation had already destroyed the Soviets by that time.
It's certainly true that the Bolshevik Party destroyed the Soviets in 1918 to 21. That is genuinely the case. Yeah? But the point is, in order to destroy it, to overcome that, to fight against the destruction of the Soviets, you've got to understand that it's not just the dictatorship of the proletariat, is not just that the country is ruled by councils elected by workers, nor just that those councils elected by workers arise out of mass struggles. Yeah? It's also necessary that the councils elected by workers arising out of mass struggles should actually meet, that there should be freedom of political parties of tendency and faction, that there should be workers' militia and the right to bear arms and not a standing army. Yeah? That, in my opinion, also that there should be term limits, i.e. that nobody gets to do a full-time job for the workers' organisations for more than a single term, and then they have to go back on the line, on the shop floor, to the mines, whatever it is.
Does that apply to full-timers as well?
Including full-timers, yeah. Absolutely, I'm for that. That's my position. That's not a CPGB position. But these positions about, and equally also that you have to have trial by jury if it's not going to be trialed by the workers' councils itself. It can't be just that you have on the one side, on the other side, a professional judiciary. And the point is that these positions about the underlying content of workers' power, that the government shall be answerable to the actual working class, are positions which we can put forward, irrespective of the question whether we're putting them forward in the context of workers' councils which emerge out of the strike struggle, or whether we're putting them forward in the context of that we propose them as alternatives, as the Democratic Republic, as alternatives to the existing constitutional regime. And yes, this is stealing the name Democratic Republic. It's stealing it back to, and forcing it back to, the Chartists' meaning of the name Democratic Republic, and setting it up in opposition to the bourgeois constitutional system of constitutional legality. Now, on what's wrong, a number of sort of points which are basically secondary points. That's my real primary point. Is simply that the fetishism of Soviets, the fetishism of the strike form. Actually, in the first place, the fetishism of the strike form actually stops you building a party. And creates the conditions in which you build only sects, or you build only loose movements which last for a while and then go nowhere. The second is that Soviets in itself is not the dictatorship of the proletariat. In order to be the dictatorship of the proletariat, it has to be democratic republican. But we can also fight for term limits, trial by jury, workers' militia, the right to bear arms, without necessarily that having to go through the form of Soviets arising out of the strike struggle. In relation to elitism and spontaneism, which Marx said, okay, it's not embedded in the transitional programme. Actually, it is. The real way in which it is embedded in the transitional programme is because the transitional programme stands on the first 4 congresses of the Comintern. And the theses of the second Congress of the Comintern, which say that the dictatorship of the proletariat can only be exercised through the leading role of the minority party, and that the party can only function through the leading role of the advanced minority in the party. That is, it is actually, in the first place, it's Bakunin's invisible dictatorship, that a minority, a secret minority, is going to actually tell everybody what to do. In the second place, it is intimately linked, because the explanation of why the working class can't take power, can't actually directly exercise power, and it has to be the minority party which exercises power, is precisely that they say the working class can only think at the level of its day-to-day struggles. And it's necessary for the party, which is the conscious part, to lead the class, which is the unconscious part. That concept of the role of the party, the problem is something which is in the first 4 congresses, in fact in the second and third congresses in particular of the Comintern, is a commitment to, which goes along precisely with what Dave said, that they smashed the Soviets. The bureaucracy triumphed in 1918 to 21. Not simply because they suppressed the Mensheviks and so on and so forth, suppressed elections to the Soviets and so on. Maybe they had to do that because of civil war, but because they theorized that, because they justified it, because they did not draw back from it when the civil war came to an end, they abandoned the dictatorship, the Bolsheviks abandoned the dictatorship of the proletariat. And to stand on the first 4 congresses of the Comintern is actually to stand on the dictatorship of bureaucracy. On Jerry, Lenin and Bukharin, the whole Bolshevik party rejected the minimum programme. Not true, it's Bukharin. And Lenin actually explicitly opposed Bukharin on this question, both in the discussions of the Congress on the revision of the programme in autumn 1917, just before the seizure of power, and also in the 1918 discussions on the revision of the programme. He says, yes, we no longer have a minimum programme, but a programme for Soviet power, because we now hold Soviet power. Yeah. But, he says, if we can't abandon the minimum programme because the bourgeoisie might take power away from us, and then we would again need a minimum programme, which is the programme for taking power. On the relationship of forces, in 1945-48, and again in 1968, it's fundamental to grasp that the objective relationship of forces is that the bureaucracy of the Stalinists are part of the system of capitalist rule. So the question, whether the question of power is posed, is the working class in a position to overthrow the bureaucracy and to lynch the full-time officials who are trying to hold on to power and drive out of the movement the people who want to restore capitalism. The relationship of the objective relationship of forces, therefore, was in 1942-48. There was a tiny minority which was in favour of the working class taking power, and an enormous majority of the workers' movement. The ability of the Stalinists to do what they did was only possible because they had broad mass support in the workers' movement. They couldn't do it without that. And just the same, in relation to May 68, you have to have, in order for the question of power to be posed, there has to be a large minority or majority party of the working class, meaning a party of the working class, not a party of the vanguard of the elect, of the specially knowledgeable, through which the working class itself can take decisions so that it's the working class's decision through the mechanism of the party, and not the decision of the elite is holding back the masses want to take power and the elite is holding them back, but it's the decision of the masses themselves to take power or not to take power. Now, actually, what we're concerned with is something rather different, which is what we were saying, and I can't remember which comrade it was saying it. The present task, if you look at the objective relationship of forces, the present situation is not one in which the question of the working class taking power in Britain is posed in the immediate future. If it happened to be the case that the question of the working class taking power in Britain was posed in circumstances in which it wasn't posed in France, Germany, Italy, and so on and so forth, that would be a fucking disaster, because if we took power, we would be crushed, and if we didn't take power, we would be crushed. But actually, that's not the situation in 1918-19, is it? It's not the situation in 1942-45, and it's not the situation, in fact, in 1968. If it weren't for the fact that the bureaucracy was in control and that the bourgeoisie could rely on the bureaucracy to get it out of a hole, in 1968-69, the question of power would be posed in France, Italy, Britain, Spain, and it was indeed posed in Portugal in 74-75. The problem is, we need to think outside the frame of imagining that the process matures in its own time in individual countries. We need to actually develop the coordinated international action of the working class under capitalism. We need to develop working class trade union militancy under capitalism. We also need to develop political democracy, not just as a tool to expose the character of the corrupt character of capitalism and so on and so forth, but also as a tool to get rid of the bloody trade union bureaucrats and the Labour bureaucrats, even down to the scale of the small Labour bureaucrats like John Rees. You know, that we need to address, yes, comrades, we need to address not a schema but the world. What we're doing is to address the world as it is and the defeats which have actually happened and the lessons which are to be drawn from the defeats which have actually happened, including the biggest of the lot, the fact that 1917 wound up leading only to 1991. You know? What you're doing is to cling to the schema of the transitional programme.
We were supposed to be back for 2:15.